Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this latest Lunch and Learn session from the Green Care Network. Great to see you all, and very pleased that Dr. Rachel Bragg can join us today. Rachel, I'll let you introduce yourself primarily, but all I will say is that you've done some seminal work for us about green care, I think over a number of years, and remain a leading light, I think it's fair to say, in the development of our thinking about green care and what it can do. Really what you're going to talk about today, which is how do we get the message across. So over to you, and I very much look forward to hearing from you. We'll have some time at the end for questions. If you want to put questions in the chat, everybody, please do that. Otherwise, there's probably enough of us just to raise your hand, actually or virtually, and we can take things from there. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Nigel. Can I just ask everybody if you're not actually saying anything to just pop yourselves on mute, just because I'm wearing some headphones to spare you the clonks and crashes here, and it's all quite magnified. So thank you very much. Thank you, Nigel, for the intro. Yes, I'm never very good at introducing myself, I find, even after all of these years. But my background is in research into green care, and particularly basically the health benefits of contact with nature. And I'm guessing I don't need to say much more about that because you're all on the Green Care network in Norfolk, and you already know that how good nature is for you. So I won't go on and on about that. All I can say really is I'm really pleased to be here with the Norfolk Green Care Network, and I'm going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour about some of the messaging and communication issues facing the sector and individual organisations, and some of the things that are happening to try to address them. Pretty much covering the points that were on the blurb that Nigel shared for the invite to this meeting. I'm going to try my hardest to only talk for 20 minutes. I'm sure Nigel will jump in and try and rein me in if I fly off at a tangent, so please do that, Nigel. But essentially what I'm going to do is talking about how you sell what you do and how you understand where your offer fits in terms of addressing a need and with other related nature-based provision. So I'm kind of, I'm basing this on quite a lot of work that I've been doing with various other organisations, and also in terms of the sector-wide work as well, because all sorts of things have happened recently. So I'm going to talk you through them. Okay, so we know that being in nature can be enormously beneficial. I'm kind of preaching to the converted here, so even though I could talk for hours about all the different benefits, I'm not going to. Just suffice it to say, we know it works, and we know that the three elements of being outside in the natural surroundings, doing something meaningful, and with a group of people all work together to bring synergistic benefits, both mental health benefits, physical health benefits. It's also very often can be a way of increasing physical activity levels by the back door or as a byproduct. We'll talk about byproducts a little bit more later on. And I'm going to talk about some general principles that apply regardless of what sort of nature-based offer you deliver, before looking at the differences or communicating differences in provision. So right, we know there's so much choice in the UK. I'm involved in a Europe-wide project, and part of what we're doing is mapping the provision in various different countries across Europe, actually. And what struck me as being involved in that work is how much choice we've got in the UK. We have got all sorts of things, all sorts of nature-based opportunities for all sorts of different people. And I think particularly since COVID, I think more people understand now how nature can be beneficial to our health and well-being. And we've got so many organisations delivering something green or nature-based. Different activities from gardening, bushcraft, farming, nature walks, forest bathing, natural crafts, all sorts of things going on. for all sorts of different people, including general population, but also people with an individual need or illness or something like that. A huge range of different focuses. We've got projects and interventions that focus on rehabilitation, healthcare, well-being benefits, right through to growing vegetables, local food production, community-based growing, sustainability, sort of anti-climate change, all sorts of things. There's just such a choice. And also delivering at a number of different levels, from drop-in, quite informal sessions through to sort of bespoke treatment and rehabilitation programs. And we need it all. It's our USP, after all, the sector. We've got an opportunity to suit everyone, really. And so on the back of this array of huge number of nature-based interventions, we've got a huge number of terms. And over the last, I think, 20 years since I've been working in this sector, there have been various quests to agree to use the same term and to sort of understand what all the terms mean. And I've come to the conclusion now that after 20 years, we've not really had any great agreement. We have different definitions, different understandings, and different personal preferences about what word do you use. Are you running a care farm or a social farm? Are you delivering green care or nature-based health promotion or something completely different? And I've come to the conclusion, really, that use the one you want to. And it really doesn't matter what the term is. The key thing is about being able to explain what it is you do and to understand how what it is you do is fitting in with the bigger picture. And yes, and what other people are calling their sort of similar services. Essentially, I think we're more successful when we make partnerships and work together and think about commonalities rather than differences. But having said that, there are times when the differences are important as well. More on that later. So what's changed recently? As I said, quite a lot's changed post-COVID, both in terms of health and social care, our green care sector, and actually as for the charity sector as a whole. One thing we've seen post-COVID particularly is a real increased need for services, particularly within mental health. So what that means is there's obviously more opportunity, but it's also putting a strain on existing services and existing budgets. The market for those of us delivering services has become much more competitive. It's simply not enough now to rely on, oh, well, we've been doing this for years. We have to be better at selling what it is we do. There's more of an appetite, certainly within health and social care, for properly developed and evidence programs. And more clarity is needed for the services provided, and why, how, who they work for, what your operating model is, and or what your delivery approach is, and that sort of thing. So I've worked with a lot of organisations, and quite a few organisations that are sort of struggling a little bit with it, with this at the moment. And the sort of successful ones will be those who identify what's working, what isn't, and adapt with the times, rather than not. So a lot of organisations actually took stock during COVID and are now ahead of the game. But what I wanted to say really here is communicating what you do and what your offer is really, really key. And this messaging and promotion is really the main focus of today. Really, for what I'm talking about today. So what do I mean? You need to know your sector and your service in order to define your offer. And I apologize if I'm teaching grandmothers to suck eggs here. I know a lot of you already know that, but you'll be amazed actually how things change over time, and you find that you're not quite as well informed as you thought you were. So you need to have a look at the evidence. We need to evidence the benefits to your service users, have a think about, what the demand is for your services, communicate the services you provide, have a think about scale and coverage, current capacity, your ability to expand in future, and which direction you might want to expand if you wanted to. You don't have to want to. And the other thing is emphasize the quality of your service provision. But the thing, again, that I'm going to talk a lot about today is about communicating the services you provide provide. I could talk about all of these, but I'm going to try and focus on communication. And this is communications for everyone, not just externally to your funders, potential referrers, potential service users, general public, on whoever the people you work with, but also internally with your staff team as well. It's really important that everybody within an organization knows what you're aiming to do, especially as organizations get bigger and bigger. This can sometimes be more of an issue. It's also brilliant for you really need to know all of these things for strategic planning as well, and for your strategic 5-year plan or whatever it is. So what do I mean by communicating your offer? As I said, in order to communicate it, you first need to understand it, and sometimes we can be so busy dealing with delivery, providing services, and finding the funding that we need to continue, that we can forget to remind ourselves to ask some key questions. Key questions like, what is your offer? What do you do? What do you not do? Who do you do it for? How do you do it? What is your approach? What is your operating model? Why does it work? What are the outcomes for your beneficiaries, whoever they may be? And so all of these things can help you look at your long-term impact. What is the long-term impact of your organization, your service, and what it's doing? I think the other thing I wanted to say about this is things morph over time. You may have opened in 1 year or whatever, and what you're delivering now may look completely different or considerably different from what you were first offering. Your offer may have expanded. You may have started offering sort of one service to one client group, and it might have expanded to do all sorts of things in the meantime. And actually, most organizations in the green care sector that I can think of all doing all sorts of different things now compared to what they did at the beginning, whether it's grown or shrunk or focused or whatever. And sometimes we forget to revisit some of these key questions. And understanding the services on offer and for whom is crucial. But this little square here, what do you not do, is also equally important, I think. What can't be provided? Who can't you cater for? What don't you do? I think there's been a danger in the sector over the years that when people come to you to say, please help, please work with this person or that person, my son, my daughter, whatever it is. And I think one thing I've found working in the nature, health and wellbeing sector is the enormous goodwill and the desire for people running organizations to help as many people as they can. And sometimes I think there's a real skill in knowing what your service can and can't do. And there's no shame in being able to say, we'd love to work with this person, but our organization doesn't have the skills, resources, or whatever to adequately meet the needs of this person. So there's no shame in saying, we'd love to help, but I'm afraid we can't. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. I can feel myself. I'll rein myself back in before Nigel has to. One of the things I did want to say, so communicating your offer, how do you answer all of these questions? A really good way of doing this is by developing a theory of change for your organization. So I've worked with quite a few organizations recently and helping them develop their theory of change for one reason or another, both new organizations and ones that have been going for years. It can be a really useful process to bring staff team together. And I think well, I'll read the slide. It helps you to reflect on your aims and your plans, to discuss them with others, the communications issue. It can also help to weigh up priorities. It can also help you decide which outcomes to measure. It forces you into simplifying your model, into really thinking what the key things are that you're trying to and what your key aspects of your work are. And I think this is important because quite often we have a short time to communicate what it is we do. And if you don't have a sort of punchy, shorter message, sometimes people can get lost in all the detail. It's a dynamic process. It can be regularly reviewed, and the end result describes how we believe what we do lead to the outcomes and the impacts we want to achieve. And you can use all sorts of different stakeholder groups in developing your theory of change. And a lot of charities who've done it often say that the process is actually just as important as the end result it produces. I've worked recently with a few organisations who are scaling up their delivery. So they're sort of creating sort of secondary sites, hub sites, doing outreach, working with different people. And, you know, I think it's really important when you're employing new staff to be able to communicate what it is your organisation does and how it works, why it works, and who for. So I'll get off my soapbox about theory of change. It's just sort of one way of doing it. And there's so much variety in theories of change. Essentially, it can be as simple or as complex as you like. One thing it can do is provide, help you create quite simplified visuals, which are really handy for popping in funding bids and really in explaining your approach as well. And, you know, you can, I've just put a few examples up here. I like logic models because they're really quite simple, but you can, depending on what it is you're offering and how complex it is, you can have all sorts of cyclical loops and things to help people understand what you do. Feel free to get in touch about, you know, if you want to know more about this. But so I've sort of really concentrated here on how you communicate what you do, but it's also quite important to see where what you do sits in relation to what other people are offering. So I'm going to move on. Now, those of you, and I can see some familiar faces on the call, so hello to those of you I've known for years. And you'll be and if you've heard me speak before, you'll see this diagram and you'll be like, oh no, not this old chestnut again. This we lovingly refer to it as our 3 circles diagram. It's been in circulation for years now. We originally developed this to explain the differences between levels of provision in the nature, health and wellbeing sector. It has been really successful, but I'm kind of thinking now that it's almost a bit too simplistic. And but I wanted to sort of pull that in for you to you know, take you down a trip down memory lane. It's not out of date, but we developed it as a tool to help us communicate different provision that's available, and that different provision is our USP in a way. We know that depending on where you are in life, you know, some of us are really lucky in that we're able to access nature in everyday life quite easily. It's something that we might do every day, but not everybody finds it, you know, as accessible. Then we've got sort of nature-based health promotion, for all sorts of different interventions that help people connect with nature in a sort of more informal or a community-based or a drop-in type of way, right through to what I call green care. Other people may call something different, nature-based therapies or whatever, where we've sort of got these sort of more therapeutic interventions. And we know that, you know, as you get better, you can move from circle to a circle. You know, as life throws you a curveball, it might mean that you need a little bit more. And that's something that we've got to offer, which is a real sort of unique selling point, really, of our sector. So I want to take you back to what we said about how many opportunities we've got in the UK. Absolutely fabulous. But we've almost been a victim of our own success in a way, in that inadvertently we've created a lot of confusion, particularly from those outside the sector. Those of us in it delivering, you know, have quite a good sort of idea of the different levels of provision that are out there. But if you're looking in from outside, you just see green or nature-based. You just see oh, something naturey, and it makes it very difficult for you to then sell your offer if we're not sort of if we're not communicating it. So as I said, we know we've got different levels of provision, but it's been a continuing challenge to try and communicate it clearly. You know, and this can negatively affect understanding, referrals, commissioning, and funding. And it can really result in people comparing apples to oranges. And getting this right and being able to communicate what it is we do and why it's different to something else is really key. And so we've sort of moved on from, we don't really care what you call yourself, really, because everybody calls themselves something different, and that's fine. And we're never going to get a sort of an agreement, really. But the priority is matching the individual to the right service provision. So if you need something light touch and drop in, certainly within things like social prescribing, we've found that most of the green social prescribing has been to sort of drop-in type sessions that you don't have to sign up to regularly and all of that sort of thing. So some people may need that. Others may need something a little bit more structured, a little bit more robust, and with more safeguarding in place. So it's really it's all about knowing which one suits the needs of the individual. Because if we get it wrong, you stand the you're at risk of not giving somebody the support they need, or putting somebody in a situation where they're getting more support and not being enabled to progress, for example. So it's all about matching client need. And so you concentrate on the service for the individual, what's the aim for them, rather than what it's called. And actually, since we've sort of sidetracked a little bit to adopt this approach, it's really helping to clarify and bring together a dispersed sector. So we're not arguing about whether we should call it green care or nature-based intervention or care farming or social farming or therapeutic gardening, social and therapeutic horticulture, animal-assisted interventions, animal-assisted therapy, and whatever it is. We're not worrying about that. It's all about the individual. And so I wanted to highlight a piece of work that came out of the Green Social Prescribing pilot, or Green Social Prescribing for Mental Health pilot, which finished earlier on this year. And this is a model, though it's using mental health levels, and mental health professionals worked with those delivering their delivery partners to provide a set of guideline levels to help the people providing the service and the link workers, in this case, the people referring into the service, talk the same language to make sure that people get into the right bit, if you like. Now, we know that some providers can cater right across these different levels. So, from level 0, which is sort of at the bottom, where somebody has decided, I may decide that I want to go for a walk every day to improve my mental health. I don't need any help. It's a decision I've come to myself, right through to, so you've got level 1, level 2, level 3, right through to level 4. Somebody experiencing an acute mental health crisis, maybe in a hospital, or having intensive support. So we've got this sort of whole 4, 5 different levels, really. And these levels have really helped providers to identify which level of need they can accommodate comfortably with the opportunities and the activities they're offering. It also enables the social prescribers to assess the suitability of the offer for their patient. So this was mental health and green social prescribing, but we've seen sort of, a number of us have seen sort of the parallels, and we've sort of thought that's a really good way of doing it. Parallels for other scenarios, both within health, not just social prescribing, but social care, special education, that sort of thing, and also really relevant to the green care sector. So, and we were talking here about how to successfully communicate green care offer to different audiences, and I think this can really help us with that. So looking at the levels, you'll see the need for the individual increases from left to right, and so too will the requirements for delivery in order to meet those needs. Level 0 isn't really an intervention. Level 4 is very much a clinical setting. And so that leaves sort of levels 1, 2, and 3 in the sort of community arena, if you like. So the therapeutic horticulture stakeholder group took this work and built on it to try and map these mental health levels to different levels of gardening provision. And this is something that we can also expand soon in future to talk about the green care or the wider offer as well. And it'll help us to highlight all of the services on offer, often with different groups of people, without losing focus. So this is a document that's out for consultation at the moment. I'll share the links to it in a minute. And I think, Nigel, you've already shared this with the coalition anyway. So some of you may have already read it and hopefully fed back on your thoughts on it. But we've mapped the different sorts of gardening provision to the different levels. With all sorts of different detail. I can see the time is ticking on. So much as I'd like to talk about each one of those individually, I'm not going to. I'm just going to say there's lots more in the diagram. But we wanted to map it so that people, providers, for exactly the same reason, so you could know what sort of gardening provision you're offering, and in order to communicate it to other people who might want to buy it, if you like. So it's available on the website here. I'll share the presentation afterwards, so you'll be able to hop onto it. There's a lot more detail in there about what it means for projects or interventions delivering, and what sort of different, from support needs, recovery pathways, benefits and outcomes, provider skills training, QA evaluation, all sorts of things. So if you haven't already seen it, please have a read and do get back to us with your thoughts. And you've got until the 27th of November. So I think that's next week, is it? I think something like that, to give us your feedback. Right, enough about that. I've had a go, and this is very much something that I've developed just to play around really with the 3 circles diagram, to sort of how we can use some of the work that we've done in the group to have a wider appeal. It's, as I said, it's for mental health. It can be developed wider, but it's just sort of helping to, marry the 2 things together, the level of need and the type of provision. I'm going to whistle on a bit that. So that's about levels and things. What I want to talk about now is another key challenge that's really hitting the sector at the moment. It's about how to communicate multiple outcomes. So we know that, taking part in something naturey, can help my mental health. It can help my physical activity. It can help me meet other like-minded people. It can help me save the planet. It can help me grow local food. It can help nutrition, all of these sorts of things. And it's a real challenge to be able to communicate this effectively without talking about saying, oh, well, we can do everything for everyone all the time at all different levels. And then people that you're communicating to, there's a temptation that it becomes like snake oil. It's the answer to everything. Everything naturey can provide all of these things. And that's certainly not what we want. It's really important to know your key focus and know what is a side effect, especially when you're selling your service to different audiences. And it's also, it can make the difference between getting referrals, if that's what you want, or getting funding, depending on the level of provision that you're offering. And it's also really important that your staff know which is the important thing as well. Key in good practice, in quality provision, all that sort of thing as well. It's about understanding your primary outcome versus byproduct. So this, and Nigel, I promise this is my, I think, last slide. So I'll shut up and let everybody talk in a minute. So I was thinking about primary outcomes. And I've sort of pulled this together. So if you are delivering a clinical provision or something for people with quite acute needs, if you're delivering on the level 2 or 3, if I was a doctor, Green's prescribing, or a community health, mental health team, I want to know that the intervention I am referring somebody into has got the client and then mental health recovery front and center. Anything else, I almost don't care about. For me, I care about the individual. Now, so, you have to highlight that the individual, if that's the level of provision you're providing, you have to make it clear that the health, the well-being, the recovery, whatever it is the priority. Now, you may well also get other byproducts. But selling them as sort of byproducts lets you know that they're a sort of added extra that comes for free. It's a bonus. It's your bonus benefit. It may be important to you, And it depends, you know, so that could be around food production. It could be about social inclusion. It could be about sustainable ways of operating to, you know, to fight against climate change, all sorts of things. But it's really crucial that you understand what's primary and what's the byproduct. So, you know, and so it's a sort of, it goes both ways. If I'm talking at this enhanced green care level, the wider outcomes, the additional bonuses may be that nutrition. It may be that people understand about food. It may be that they make friends, whatever it is, or learn how to grow vegetables. But that's very much, if I was a clinician referring to your service, I would want to know that your intervention is set up for person-centered care, and that what it is you're doing is defined by the needs of the individual, not the needs of the project. Now, when you're catering at the lower levels, you've got a lot more freedom. Essentially, you've got a lot more freedom of focus. So you could be selling your community garden or your community food growing initiative, whatever it is, you know, urban food, you know, whatever it is, you can be selling that as your key focus. My primary focus is to increase, you know, nutritional levels for a particular deprived inner city area. And I'm doing this via community gardening or whatever it is. And then, you know, and that may be the pots of money that you're going for, or the funding and the support. You know, that could be the key driver, in which case you've got to highlight your primary outcomes as the key drive, you know, to match. You've got to hang your hook. You've got to hang your service on the right hook for the person that you're delivering to. Now, of course, you can then say, and as a byproduct, people become more physically active. They meet people, they, you know, their well-being improves because they're meeting other people in their local community. But, you know, if you're selling nature, if you're selling health and well-being as a byproduct, then it is likely that your service will not get chosen by clinicians, and vice versa. If your primary objective is personal well-being and person-centered care, then you probably won't get the pot of money that's designed for people making a difference to their local community in nutrition or something. And it really doesn't matter what it is you do, but you really need to be able to communicate it. And if you're delivering at the more person-centered end, then your mechanisms, your policies and processes you have to have in place have got to be sort of more robust, if you like. And it's just knowing that. So I'm going to stop talking, I think, now, because I've gone wantonly. I'm 13 minutes over the 20 minutes, Nigel.
Don't worry
I'm
about
really
it. Don't
sorry.
worry about it.
So I'm going to, shall I stop
Yes, please.
sharing the screen now so we can see each other? Right. Excellent. Right. I can make you bigger so I can
Lovely.
see everybody.
Well, that was absolutely fantastic, Rachel. Lots
Thank
to
you.
think about there. I was particularly taken with your last few slides and the idea of primary outcomes and byproducts. I mean, this is something that I've come to realize, I guess, in the last few years, where we've got more and more involved in biodiversity improvement or action to mitigate climate change. And I coined the phrase shades of green. You know, there are different aspects of green activity that bring a whole range of different benefits. I think the way you've classified and analysed that is really helpful. So thank you very much for that. I see there's one hand up already, I think. Was there a hand up, Karen? No.
Sorry, I was clapping.
Oh, right. My apologies. Applause. Yeah, well, I agree with that. Open to everybody else for questions or comments. So I can take a virtual hand raise or put your hand up on the screen and I'll see you. Julie, over to you.
Hello, I'm actually wearing two hats because I'm representing Katie from Wisbech Community Farm as well. And hello, I wanted to pick up on something you said, Rachel, which I think is really pertinent about the added value as well. One of the things that we're seeing, particularly in Herefordshire, which we'll probably track over to Norfolk if it hasn't already, is around funding for people. So people who traditionally have had funding to access green care provision, because of the tightening of budgets, there is a real move from health and social care to look at if people should be funded through continuing health care. So they're being reassessed, and the bar is effectively, rising. But one of the things that does come out of what you've just said that is really good to map into any if someone's coming to look at your service that you provide, is the sort of hidden opportunities for addressing continuing healthcare and preventative healthcare. So looking at things like obviously diet, well-being, dental care is a really big one, obesity. So any opportunities that you have within the service that you provide that you can really evidence those wider health initiatives is really important, because that's seen as something that will save money within health and social care along the line. So I think, your last slide was really good for showing that, and we found it was a really good activity to think about it, of all the things we were doing that we hadn't really sort of perhaps highlighted as much. So thank you for raising that.
Yeah,
No pressure. I mean, I think that's a really good point. And one thing I haven't tackled is the SORI, the economic benefits of being able to, as you say, tackle all sorts of different health issues, if you like, in one bundle. And I know the Wildlife Trusts have done some work on that, but I think that's another argument that we need to say, look, because of all of these additional benefits, it's saving money right across the board. But of course, where there is a difficulty because people aren't often thinking about the benefits sort of holistically across lots of different sectors. They're just thinking about their bit, which is a real shame. So I'm glad you found it. Glad you found it useful.
Good. Anyone else got anything they'd like to pick up on? Francis.
Hi, thank you for that. It was really, really interesting and quite apt, because I work probably in that level 4 of the slide, and I'm currently trying to build up momentum of a green walking group with these guys here, and it's not that it's necessarily hard, but it's a slow process, and I just want to say it really helps knowing kind of what to highlight when it comes to the primary outcomes. My question is quite simple, really. What does WB stand for when it was primary outcomes for health?
Well-being. That was just no, I thought, I was just trying to because some of these are hot off the press. I thought, how can I actually explain what I mean? And I obviously put WB in and didn't expand it to well-being. So yes, well-being. What a great question. Really
I thought it was
easy.
wobbly bottom, Rachel. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
No, thank you. And I'm sure there's lots more in that which you could have gone into. So I'd be really interested to almost have that PowerPoint and then look into it myself.
Yes, and please do go to the document. So it's very much a consultation document, rather like some of the work that I've done previously. It's the Growing Care Farming project, if you like, was it said care farming on the tin, but it had wider ramifications, exactly the same as this. The therapeutic horticulture stakeholder group is doing one bit of work, but we very much see that as being able to be sort of much more widely applied. So please have a look at the document and see, especially I'd be really interested in your context to see whether what we've written resonates with what you think. And do please fill out the Survey Monkey and tell us if it does or if it doesn't, because we will be tweaking this because we do care. It's got to be relevant to as many people as possible. Otherwise, we're not communicating properly.
Yeah, just for the benefit of everyone, I'm actually on that working group, and as you said, Rachel, I've circulated round via email to our membership the survey that you referred to. So hopefully there'll be a few responses coming back, which will help to develop that. Great. Karen, over to you.
Hello, Rachel. I'm Karen Smith. I'm based at the University of East Anglia in the School of Literature, Drama and Creative Writing. But I also, what I do is I direct a project that creates heritage trails. And one of the things that presentation was amazing in terms of clarity of message. And in terms of the kind of research that we want to do and move forward, we've definitely changed. So I definitely think I'll be doing this theory of change model mapping as a way to make sure we're clear with our message, because we've definitely changed in our project. And one of the difficulties I have is in approaching funding bodies, but also approaching communities, because there tends to be a familiarity of people in social geography, healthcare, to be looking at these kinds of projects more so than humanities scholars. So a creative storyteller coming along, unless you happen to be a community creative practitioner that the Arts Council or somebody like that will fund, it's kind of like, well, why are you getting involved in health intervention? You know, I mean, what kind of background do you have? And we can list all our partners and say we've got all the expertise, but in terms of getting that message across about co-production, and I was quite interested at times you were saying working with and working for, putting the person centered at the start. And I was just wondering if you have any suggestions about, you know, focusing on how to sell that message about co-production and putting forward, because that's what the humanities people are interested in, you know, that sense of participatory involvement and working with rather than working to people.
I mean, I think that's a really good question, and co-production is you know, key as well. And curated co-production, there's all sorts. I could also go on about that for days, so I'm going to try and pull myself back in. But I think that's why I like the theory of change model so much, because it's, you know, I've worked with organizations where we've involved all the staff, right from, you know, people who are delivering right through to board members, and, you know, people at all sorts of different levels with all sorts of different sizes of organizations. And if you do your process properly, everybody can have a voice, including the service users that you work with and the people that you work with. And then what you get at the end is a sort of almost agreed model of what it is you do. And that having so I've been working with one organization for almost a year now on all sorts of different elements of their work and things, and it's been fascinating to see how it's almost empowered the staff team, because they're all working together. And this is an organization with about 10 different sites across England, and it's brought everybody together and it's helped them to understand what it is that they're doing. And I think if you're involving all your stakeholder groups in this process, which can be as big or as little as it doesn't have to take a year, you know, it doesn't have to involve everybody, but it can do, and it can be a really sort of participatory and iterative process, which is where I came in years and years ago. I've sort of come full circle. I'm doing a lot more participatory work now, which I'm finding on a personal level enormously rewarding, because you come in, facilitate, step out again, and the thing's gone from strength to strength, which is just, I get a real buzz out of that. So I think if you can show that you've involved people, then, you know, it helps. I'm not sure whether that helps in your specifics, but the more participatory you can be, helps you in saying, well, this is, you know, we spoke to the people that use our service, and this is what we all agreed on. Yeah. And that gives more power than saying, right, we do this, we do that for these people, and it works. You know, if you can show an iterative process, then I think you're onto a winner.
Thank you. The other thing which Karen's question reminds me of is, you know, you talked about byproducts, Rachel, and other avenues into, if you like, the benefits of nature connection. And clearly the creative arts and heritage are other routes, aren't they? And
absolutely.
I know from my own projects locally that, you know, we're thinking very much along those lines. And Karen developed and runs a project which she touched on called Paston Footprints, which is about the Paston family in Norfolk, and a series of wonderful walking trails and cycling trails for people to discover heritage, but at the same time connect with nature. So, you know, there's a great example of, you know, different strands can come together creatively, can't they?
Absolutely. And it's people are different people, you know, have different hooks to float their boat, pardon the pun. You know, if it's history or heritage, or if it's sort of bird watch, whatever it is, you know, we're all different, and we all have other, you know, other people, you know, with a sort of slightly more artistic than I am. You know, it's the light, you know, amazing light when you're out in nature, all sorts of different things. And quite honestly, and it's the same with tech and kids. there should be many more apps and things that, tech and nature shouldn't be separate. If you use one to access the other, then bring it on. I think sort of whatever makes it more accessible to a wider range of people, the better, because we know that nature is really beneficial, but there are lots of people who either can't or don't have the opportunity to access it, won't because they don't have the desire, and they're missing out on all of these benefits. And we're in really stressful times. Being able to calm and breathe in nature is should be something that everybody is able to do. So yeah, whatever floats their boat, arts, crafts, heritage, whatever.
Absolutely.
I think it's all important.
Anyone else got any comments or questions? If not, I'll just pick up on another one, which is slightly disappointing in a way, or very disappointing. I mean, I heard recently, and others may be aware of this, that our local integrated care board have basically decided that a strategy for social prescribing is not a priority for them. And the person who's been leading that recently, I think her role is basically under threat, which is a great shame, because she's done some fantastic work to pull together the social prescribing link workers across the county into a group and started to develop some great ideas, including a wonderful project which many of you will be familiar with called Nature Prescriptions, which has been developed with the RSPB locally and is in the process of being rolled out. My question really, Rachel, was really trying to get, I suppose, a perspective from you at national level about green social prescribing particularly, and how do you see that rolling out and building on the some of the work you referred to in the pilot projects and so on over the coming year and so on?
It's a really interesting question, because in the early days of social prescribing, we all thought, oh, fantastic, this is it's going to be an amazing referral mechanism to nature-based interventions. And then nothing happened for years, essentially, certainly not with nature on the green side. And then sort of social prescribing got a bit of a resurgence. And then we've got the National Academy for Social Prescribing with all sorts of things. And then they finally had the green social prescribing pilot, which I have to say, it was brilliant, but it came up with some of the findings it came up with were exactly the same as some findings that we came up with sort of 5-6 years before, but nobody took seriously. But the great thing is because it was part of the GSP pilot project, that they're now set in stone so people believe them. So that's sort of one thing. And they've definitely created the sort of money that's put into that has definitely created some good resources that we can use in a much wider setting. One of the things I've said for a long time is, let's not put all our eggs in one referral basket. At the moment, for nature-based interventions, most referrals, and I'm probably talking on the green care end because that's my sort of area of expertise, aren't coming from social prescribing. Some of the more community-based initiatives are getting people through social prescribing, but there is some money available, but it's not right across the board. But essentially, most nature-based interventions that I know get referrals from pretty much every other source except social prescribing. So there's a sort of warning there not to put all your eggs in one basket, but you also got to be in it to win it. So you seriously do, support it wherever you can. But I remember one of my colleagues at Social Farms and Gardens, my colleague Debbie Evans, once said to me, she said, yeah, but how long will social prescribing go on for? It could just die a death. If it's not trendy in future, again, all of this, we could lose all this work, which I think I'm really quite saddened to hear, Nigel, about your tale about the board in Norfolk not seeing social prescribing as a priority. But it's also sort of highlighted, I think, there are some issues with it, and part of that has been around communication. If you are a GP and you're prescribing a session for somebody, whether it's through green social prescribing or anything else, if you're prescribing something, you need to know for your peace of mind that the intervention can adequately work with the person's needs, that they are looking at, they can evidence their the benefits and the outcomes, that it's delivered to a high quality, and and the quality assurance. And we have, there are elements of all of those in the sector, but it's not right across the board. And I think there are GPs out there who are terrified of signposting somebody with a mental health issue to a project that may work with people with mental health issues, but they haven't got the proper safeguarding, the staff training, or the resources in place to cope if that person has a crisis. All the interventions that I work with that work primarily with mental health, and they are providing a service, they've got all sorts of policies and procedures in place. The example I always use is, okay, you're working with people with a range of mental health conditions, and you're working with livestock. All of a sudden, somebody goes into crisis, has a complete meltdown, and all your cows get out onto the A5. Your staff and your team has to swing into action, because you've got two issues going on, and you need to have policies and practices in place so that you can stop the cows endangering life, and that the person who's having crisis gets the support they need, and all the rest of the people that you are working with are also not left high and dry. And that's quite a tall order, and that's one example I always give, but it just highlights, I think, some of the worries that some GPs have.
And I guess it goes back to the importance of what you were talking about in terms of evidence and quality assurance, really, isn't it? And a quick plug for Social Farms and Gardens and their quality mark, which some of you may be familiar with. I mean, that is starting to develop into a very useful, basic, but very useful tool that can be used to, if you like, say that a certain provider is reaching certain basic standards, including things like safeguarding and so on that you mentioned, Rachel.
And yes, I think that's right. And even if you don't want to go through the process, the framework is now freely available. So you can at least have a sort of checkbox. I love it for new organisations, especially new organisations where staff haven't necessarily had a background in social care or in whatever else. It can be really good to make sure that they've at least considered the things, and also to make a decision about, oh, well, actually this isn't the sort of thing I wanted. I don't want to provide this amount of care. I want to do something a lot more low key, and it's all fine. You just have to know what it is you want to do, and what you can do and what you can't.
Yeah, thank you. Just a final really question to those of us who are with you today, who are actually actively involved in green care projects. I'm thinking particularly of Tabitha, Jeff, Katie. We've heard from Julie already, I think. And I mean, what do you take from today's session? Are there particular nuggets that you think are particularly important for you in what you're doing? Jeff?
Yeah. Hello, Rachel. Great to hear you and see you again.
Likewise.
We've been doing a thing recently for the last couple of years, really, called Embracing Difference, which is where we're realizing that actually it's not just about the care provision. It's not just about going out and being, growing things or being with animals, but it's actually about the entire community that is created and the well-being that people get and the recovery that they get. And we've got people with dementia who have, in 6 weeks, gone from a memory level of 5 minutes to the whole morning. I mean, just incredible because of the support that they're getting, having people around them and the animals. I mean, the donkey, brilliant. So I think that one of the issues that we've had, I don't know how many of you know Tom Brown, who was Chief Exec of Greenlight Trust. Brilliant guy, full of data. And we were talking recently, and he was saying that one of the issues that we have is we go out for £5,000-10,000 funding for these pot and that pot to run a project, whereas he goes out and gets $250,000 because he's going to the NHS and he's saying, this is the problem. You can't handle that, can you? But we can. And as an industry, as an organization or whatever, we can do that. We can take that all out off you and we'll get these results. Now, I think that's superb and good on Tom. And I want a slice of that because I know that all of us here can make that difference to people. And I'm desperate, before I get too old, to try and say to the NHS and to other people, give us a chance, help us. But in a way, I've got to learn how to sell that better. So it's really interesting hearing what Rachel was saying about selling. I come from a marketing background. I should know this, but in a way, I've kind of shelved that since I got out of marketing. But I think it's really, really key that we've got to learn, and as an industry, how we've got to do it. Because if one of us works, it works for all of us.
Absolutely. And this is, I mean, I've had a journey as well, a personal journey, in that, you know, I've now thought, actually, I'm never going to get everybody to agree on terminology. But if we can agree on what we can provide and what we don't provide, and that, you know, I think there needs to be, I think you're spot on, you know, it's collaborative working. You know, we can't, one of the issues we have in our sector is that the reason a lot of the stuff we do work so well is because we work with small numbers of people, and it's that sort of smaller communities. We're not dealing with 200 people on one site in a day, generally. Anyway, I know some people do, but it's scale. And when people are wanting to, they want offers that can deliver at scale. And the only way we could do that is by working together to provide and to package up our offer at scale. You know, and we've got this with all of these opportunities, we've got all of these different things so that we can provide bespoke care, you know, and things that float different people's boats. But we can't do it in isolation. You know, we need to be able to work together to put in regional bids, to put in, you know, bids together and work sort of collegiately, really, in order to achieve it. Because I take the point, and you have to think big. And it's really interesting, Jeff, what you say, because I know you're from a marketing background, but you almost sort of, it's the case in point. You're looking at what it is you're doing and perhaps not selling the bigger story. And, you know, like Tom is, and I think it's really exciting. I think working together is the way forward. I wish I had all the answers about exactly how it works, because I think it's quite difficult with different organizations with different sort of modus operandi to sort of come together, but I'm sure it must be possible. And if we want to mainstream green care, we're going to have to manage it.
Yeah, I think if I can come back on that, I mean, I think a key stage in that process is about awareness raising, isn't it, in terms of what's already happening, and in a way that, as you've described it, Rachel, that in terms of what the benefits are for different groups of people. One of the things we're trying to do with the network is to update and extend our website, and Francis, who's on the call today, is going to be taking the lead on this. With basically, we've got a number of members of the network who we think, or we know, are involved in directly providing green care in the broadest sense, but we don't really have any much more information available on our website. We've got a few project profiles on there which I think are very useful. Some of those need to be updated, but we'd love to, you know, basically have much better coverage of what's already happening out there as a baseline, from where we can say to the NHS and other providers, social services, etc., look, have a look here, because one of these projects might actually meet some of the needs that you've got in your particular area, or for a particular group of people. I think that's the next step for us, and inevitably there's an issue of capacity to take a lot of this work forward, especially if, as I've said, the local ICB is not prepared to invest in, you know, development time to do it themselves.
And I think that's key, because the other key finding that came out of the Green Social Prescribing pilot was the need for this hub. You know, you need to have a one-stop shop where you can, you know, go to and you see what's available in your area. Every single one of the pilots started off trying to do that. We know that there's all sorts of initiatives like that in different areas around the UK that have done that. Some of them have missed huge chunks. Other, you know, it's this. Yeah. It's working together business. Some people get quite clucky and say, no, it's just our members on this hub. Other people are including absolutely everything and have got so much data that they then can't handle it, update it, or signpost adequately. And it's a key issue. I'm going to stop because I can see Katie's got her hand
Katie,
up.
over to you. And we'll make this the final question, but over to you, Katie.
I'll be very quick. And I use the word cross-pollinate all the time, and connectivity. And I love the word network in the Norfolk Green Care, because I hope one day that somebody will be able to fund Nigel's organisation to log us all, because we're all here, you know, we're all here in the woods waiting. And it's how do people find us? And we're doing all we can constantly, you know, ambassadors of nature and being there. But I know that, you know, there's so many people who would enjoy coming to me. And then you're right, for me to remind myself about my important words of what I offer, because I think Tabitha and I say this all the time, that we're so immersed in nature all the time, we just almost assume that everyone else is too.
Yeah.
And you know, when I'm looking at leaves or spiders' webs or rainbows, you know, I just can't breathe. I'm so excited with it all. And I desperately want to just give those magic moments to everybody and anybody. And so I need to be, just like Jeff was saying, a little bit more proud of the words, that the feedback which comes back from my clients, which is hugely changing their daily lives and making them feel part of nature.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Katie. I mean, I think what you said will be music to Diane's ears, because our treasurer, Diane, is actually pursuing some funding opportunities at the moment to try and give us a bit more of a core fund for the network. So good luck, Diane. I know there are a few opportunities out there. Maybe we'll be lucky and get a bit more to do a bit more. Right, folks. Well, I think we're up to time. Thank you all very much for your attendance today. And again, a very big thank you to Rachel for your contribution, which was really stimulating, as you've heard from the questions, I think, and the comments, Rachel. And I'm sure there's lots of material there which we'll either develop individually or collectively in some way. So I shall stop recording in a moment, because the other thing I just wanted to flag up is that these lunch and learn sessions, we're going to try and do one of these every month. We don't have anything plugged in for December yet, and it may be a bit too short notice to do something in December, but I'm very pleased to say that in January, having had a really stimulating discussion with a lady called Jo Metcalf, some of you may know, is founder and director of Greener Growth. They are returning to do more work in Norfolk, and she's particularly keen, I think, to work in prisons. So she's going to come along and do a session in January about the work they've been doing in prisons, which is, I think, fascinating. And then in February, those of you who came to the Green Gathering we had recently may have heard or seen the presentation from Ruth Taylor from Mind about forest bathing. Well, she and her colleague Lucy are going to come along in February and give us a lunch and learn about forest bathing and their Nature Connect project, which has been running in one of the more deprived areas in Norwich as well, with great success, I think. So a couple on the way. If you have any particular ideas or things you think would be useful, we'd love to hear from you. So please let us know and we'll try and program something in. But for the moment, thank you all very much again. I'll stop recording and wish you all a lovely day.